Welcome to the next part of our literacy series. We're going to do some close reading and analyze an argument. All right, so the steps for writing an extended response. First thing you got to do is unlock the prompt, which includes reading the question carefully, looking for verbs and underlining important information that's being asked of you. So to help you understand what you need to do, explaining the prompt in your own words. This practice demonstrates that you understand what the question is that's being asked of you. And finally, to restate the prompt, expectations in a thesis statement. And so if you can do that in your own words, then you are answering the entire question that is being asked of you. Today, we're going to focus on step 5. Read the passage closely and take notes that respond to the prompt expectations. Just before we do that, I want to remind you about the burger style. The thesis, when you unlock the prompt, is your answer to the question, and the hamburger, that's the top of the bun, the crown. So you want to have an appealing-looking thesis statement that answers the entire question. And then warrant, those are the statements in your essay that are like the layers of lettuce, tomato, onion, and cheese. Give it a little flavor, some zip, and it's going to connect the evidence to the answer to your question. So the next part of your testing process, you get primary source documents to work with. Those are the text, the evidence that will be the hamburger meat in your burgers. And in order to help you understand, there's some background information that precedes it. So what we're going to start with today is a close reading of that background information. And here's a reminder of the prompt that we're working with. It's concerning the Mexican Revolution. So what you need to be able to argue about here is whether the French and the American Revolution promoted a Mexican revolution for independence. So that is the question at hand, and you're going to be looking for information to support an answer one way or the other. And in order to closely read the background information, we're going to follow this process that's outlined here. First thing, we're going to read one paragraph at a time. We're going to underline important words that may relate to the prompt. Once we've read it once, we're going to reread and see if we can highlight anything that might suggest a potential answer to the prompt. We're going to repeat the process until we arrive at page 4 of this document, because that's the end of the background information. And then finally, we're going to come up with a potential thesis that might be an answer that we could work with. Of course, we still need to go through the evidence that's provided in the test before we can decide which thesis we should commit to. Here we go. All right, background information. If one says American Revolution in the United States today, it is assumed that being referred to as the North American liberation struggles against the British Empire in the late 18th century. All right, so already we got revolution, we got empire, we got a time frame, might be important. North America is a geographic region, so it'll be important to know where it is in relation to Mexico, because that's part of what our prompt is about. But the British North Americans were not the only group of European colonists in the Americas to rebel against their distant rulers in this era. Okay, not the only group. Might be a suggestion. Beginning in 1808, those in Spain's vast American empire spanning from Mexico in the north to Buenos Aires in the south, Peru in the west, to present-day coast of Venezuela in the east, rose up against Spanish rule. As in North America, a combination of ideology, geopolitics, and material interests motivated the revolutionaries. All right. British North Americans were not the only group of colonists to rebel against their distant rulers in the era. So we're already sort of setting up a comparison here. That might be a possible answer that they're looking for, to make a comparison. And then this explains right here. It says, as in North America, a combination of ideology, geopolitics, and material interests motivated the revolutionaries. So we need to be able to figure out if they have common ideologies, if there's common geopolitics, and common material interests. We need to know what these words are, so we're going to have to look them up. What's the definition of geopolitics? What is an ideology? Of all the revolutions in modern history, those in Spanish America in the early 19th century might be the most closely related to the 18th century revolution of the United States. Against we got revolution, revolution, time frame, United States, Spanish America. I wonder, is that Mexico? In both cases, centuries-old transatlantic colonial ties were severed in wars of independence. That's in the prompt, too. Both revolutionary movements were also civil wars of sorts, pitting pro-independence factions against those who fought for the continuation of a colonial connection. There's that word independence again. In time, a single United States emerged from the ashes of British colonialism. In Spanish America, several new states came into being, led by Mexico, Gran Colombia, whose territory included present-day Colombia, Panama, Venezuela, and Ecuador, Peru, Buenos Aires, present-day Argentina, and Chile. There's a source there. Okay, let's reread that paragraph. Of all the revolutions in modern history, those in Spanish America in the early 19th century might be the most closely related to the 18th century revolution in the United States. So right here, whoever is writing this prompt here, the previous knowledge, is already suggesting what the answer is, that there's a strong connection. And then they go on to list what those connections are. Here's one connection, two connections. Here's a contrast, though, because America, the United States of America, emerges as one state, but there's multiple states here. Multiple. Okay, so let's not forget about that. The stage for upheaval and dissatisfaction gave rise to Mexican independence was set by political and economic changes in Europe and its American colonies in the late 18th and 19th centuries. The French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars diverted attention from Spain and its colonies, leaving a vacuum and increasing dissatisfaction and desire for local government. Okay, so France is mentioned in the prompt, so we underline that. The forced removal of Ferdinand the 5th, 6th, 7th from the Spanish throne and his replacement by Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, presented an opportunity for the Mexican intelligentsia to promote independence in the name of a legitimate Spanish king. Wow, there's a lot of words there. So here's a historical figure. This is a historical figure. Who's Napoleon? Why is his brother put in charge? What's intelligentsia? What do they mean by a legitimate Spanish king? And how did this lead to promotion of independence? From its inception, oh wow, I saw a movie about Inception. A movie called Inception. It was about dreams. The colonial government of New Spain was dominated by the Spanish-born peninsulars, it's a vocabulary word, Guacapins, who held most leadership positions in the church and government, in contrast to Mexican-born Creoles, who were the 10-to-1 majority. Wow. Okay, let's circle that. That's important. Neither peninsulars nor Creoles desired to involve the masses of native Indians and mestizos in government or moves for local control. All right. Now, does any of this suggest what an answer is about the connection here? French Revolution diverted attention of Spain and its colonies. Okay, so Spain couldn't administer its colonies. and there was a desire for local government. Okay, so that might be something that suggests a connection. Um, Forced removal of Franz Ferdinand replacement presented an opportunity to promote independence in the name of a Spanish king. Um, that might be a difference. From its inception, the colonial government of New Spain was dominated by both Spanish peninsulars or Guacopins, whose most leadership positions in the church and government, in contrast to the Mexican-born Creoles, who were a 10-to-1 majority. I have to think about that. That might be important, but I'm not sure. Neither peninsulars or upper-class Creoles desired to involve the masses of native Indians and mestizos in governments or moves for local control. That might also be important, but I'm not sure. Um, all of this stuff sounds like it might be unique to Mexico. What I have to do is find out if there's any connection between these different groups of people and groups of people in the US independence movement or in France. Okay. The ideals of the Mexican Revolution grew out of the basic belief that a few wealthy landowners could no longer continue the old ways of Spanish colonial rule, a feudal like system, to find out what feudalism is, called encomienda. That system needed to be replaced by a modern one, which those who actually worked the land could extract its wealth through their labor. We have to find out what extract is. Um, what would be a modern one? And do we know who the wealthy landowners are? Because I'm not sure if they were mentioned previously or not. I'm going to have to look back and compare to other things that I underlined. Okay, so a main ideal of the Mexican Revolution, or a basic belief, right? That's going to be important for making a connection between that and other revolutions. So if I know if that is the same or different from one or both of those revolutions, then that would help me formulate an answer to my question. Also, I could use it for justification when it comes time to put some of those warrant statements in there. The Mexican Revolution started in 1910 when liberals and intellectuals began to challenge the regime of dictator Porfirio Diaz, who had been in power since 1877, a term of 34 years called El Porfiriato, violating the principles and ideals of the Mexican Constitution of 1857. Wow, okay. 1910, 1877, 1857. Those sound like important dates, but they seem like they might be outside the time frame for making the comparison. So I'm going to have to think how I would use that information or how that affects my idea of what the answer could be. In late 1910, Francisco I. Madero drafted the Plan de San Luis Potosí, which was widely distributed and embraced by rebel movements across the nation. Okay. Rebel movements lead revolution. And also there's an S here, so there's multiple. That might be important for making a comparison between Mexican Revolution and French and United States revolutionary movements. In this plan, Madero called for an uprising to start on November 20th, 1910, to restore the Constitution of 1857, to restore the Constitution, interesting, and replace dictator Diaz with a provisional government. Its main purpose was to establish a democratic republic and to abolish unlimited presidential terms. So that's the goal, and that's a goal. That's important. Okay. So, when I'm looking back on this, I have to consider if this, restoring a constitution, establishing a democratic republic, and abolishing unlimited presidential terms, is this the same or different in French and American Revolution? Okay. In the southern state of Morales, as early as 1909, here's another date, Emiliano Zapata had started recruiting thousands of peasants to fight for land reform in support of El Plan de Ayala, or Ayala, approved by Zapata's supporters in 1911. So here's a different plan. It's not the same. I have to know what that is too. Under this plan, land reform to help campesinos, landless peasants, by redistributing the land back to the peasants and away from powerful landowners was paramount. Huh. What does that mean? Okay. So, here's another social class, landless peasants, redistributing land away. So I need to know, is land a theme of those other revolutions? Because if it is, I can make a comparison. If it's different, I can say that this is why they're not the same. Now we've got a timeline of revolutions, okay? I see that the American Revolution is in there, the French Revolution is in there, and then the Mexican War of Independence is in there. These ones are in the 18th century. And then 1810 to 1821, that is in the 19th century. But all these 1900s, right, these things that we just read about, that is in the 20th century. So when I discuss whether there was an influence or not, I really need to be conscientious of discussing eras. Which centuries did these revolutions occur in, and how did the differences in time either allow interaction to occur or stop interaction to occur? All right. So now we're at the place where we could write a potential thesis, and now that you've marked up your previous knowledge, you can go back and reread what you've marked and decide one or two potential theses that you could create, and then we will go on to try to find information to support one way or the other.